Racist neighbor calls the cops on black couple, shocked to discover the wife's true identity. It was a beautiful, quiet afternoon in the neighborhood. Birds chirped in the trees, and the houses all stood in perfect rows, with green lawns and clean driveways. It was the kind of place people dreamed of living in, peaceful, welcoming, and safe. At least, that's what Angela and Marcus Thompson thought when they moved in. Angela and Marcus had worked hard for this life. Angela was confident, friendly, and always believed in showing kindness. Marcus, her husband, was calm, thoughtful, and always supportive. Together, they made the perfect team. Moving to this neighborhood was their chance to build a future, a fresh start in a place where everything seemed perfect. But little did they know, not everyone was happy about their arrival. As we continue this story, tell us in the comments where you're watching from and subscribe to join the Living Stories tribe. Angela adjusted the bow on the gift basket she was carrying. She had spent hours putting it together, a bottle of wine, some snacks, and a handwritten note. She wanted everything to be just right. "You think this is too much?" Angela asked Marcus, her voice full of nervous energy. Marcus laughed softly, shaking his head. "Angela, you could have just brought cookies, but you went all out. It's nice. They're going to love it." Angela smiled, trying to relax. She had always believed in making a good first impression. As they walked down the street toward their neighbor's house, her heels clicking softly on the pavement, she couldn't help but notice how quiet it was. Curtains shifted in windows. People peeked out, only to quickly disappear when Angela and Marcus glanced their way. A dog barked sharply from one of the yards, the sound breaking the stillness. "Are they staring at us?" Angela whispered. Marcus gave a small shrug. "Probably. It's a new neighborhood. People are curious," he said, though the tension in his voice told her he noticed it too. When they finally reached the door, Angela hesitated for just a second. "Do you think this is a bad idea?" she asked, holding the basket a little tighter. Marcus gave her a reassuring look. "Come on, Angela, it's a good idea. Let's just say hi." Angela nodded, taking a deep breath. She knocked gently on the door. The sound echoed, louder than she expected, through the quiet street. For a moment there was nothing. Then, the door creaked open. A woman stood there, peeking out cautiously. She didn't smile or greet them. She just looked at them for a long moment. Angela, always the friendly one, gave her best smile. "Hi, we're your new neighbors, Angela and Marcus Thompson. We just moved in down the street, and we wanted to stop by and say hello." The woman blinked, her face blank. She didn't open the door any wider. Angela's heart sank a little, but she kept smiling. Finally, the woman muttered, "Oh, hi." Angela held out the basket. "We brought you this. Just a little something to introduce ourselves." The woman hesitated before slowly opening the door wider. She reached out and took the basket. "Richard," she called over her shoulder, "the new neighbors are here." A man appeared behind her, tall and friendly, with a warm smile that immediately put Angela at ease. "Welcome," he said, stepping forward and shaking both their hands. His handshake was firm, his smile genuine. "It's so nice to meet you both." "Come in," Richard said, waving them inside. Angela and Marcus exchanged a quick glance before stepping through the door. The house was beautiful. Polished wooden floors, large windows that let in lots of light, and a cozy but elegant feel. It felt like the kind of home you'd see in a magazine. "Make yourselves comfortable," Richard said, motioning toward the couch. Angela and Marcus sat down, smiling politely. Richard took a seat across from them, but the woman stayed standing. "I'm Sarah," she finally said, crossing her arms. Her tone wasn't exactly rude, but it wasn't friendly either. Richard started asking questions, where they had moved from, how they liked the neighborhood so far. His tone was warm and welcoming, but Sarah stayed quiet, watching Angela and Marcus closely. Angela, wanting to break the tension, complimented the home. "Your house is beautiful," she said with a genuine smile. "And the neighborhood is so quiet. We're really looking forward to living here." Sarah gave a tight-lipped smile, but didn't respond. After a few more minutes of polite conversation, Angela decided to try something else. "Do you need any help in the kitchen?" she asked Sarah. "I'd love to give you a hand." Sarah hesitated before nodding. "Sure. I was just about to make some coffee," she said, her voice stiff. Angela tried her best to brush off the strange tension in the house. Richard was friendly enough, but Sarah's icy demeanor lingered in the back of her mind. Still, Angela reminded herself why she had come here, to build bridges, not to break them. She followed Sarah into the kitchen, hoping that helping her out might ease some of the awkwardness. The kitchen was stunning. White marble countertops, sleek stainless steel appliances, and everything so perfectly organized that it almost felt too perfect. "Your kitchen is amazing," Angela said warmly, hoping to start a conversation. Sarah barely glanced at her as she opened a cabinet. "Thanks," she muttered, her tone flat. She pulled out 2 mugs and placed them on the counter, her movements quick and almost robotic. Angela smiled, trying to keep the mood light. Her eyes wandered to the counter, where something caught her attention. There, sitting in the soft glow of the kitchen lights, was a small golden box. It sparkled, its intricate design glinting beautifully. Angela couldn't help but admire it. "Wow," Angela said, pointing at the box. "That's gorgeous. Is it an heirloom?" Sarah froze. Her hand, which had been reaching for the coffee pot, stopped midair. For a moment, she didn't say anything. Then, slowly, she turned to look at the box. "It's special," she said, her voice sharp. Angela blinked, surprised by the sudden change in Sarah's tone. "It's been in my family for years," Sarah added, her words clipped. She quickly grabbed the box and moved it to a cabinet, shutting the door firmly as if hiding it from view. "What would you have done if you were in Angela's shoe?" Angela felt a knot of tension form in her stomach. She hadn't meant to offend Sarah. "I'm sorry," she said quickly. "I didn't mean to pry. It's just so beautiful." Sarah didn't respond. Instead, she turned back to the coffee, her shoulders stiff. The air in the kitchen grew heavier, the silence stretching longer than it should have. Angela cleared her throat, trying to shake off the unease. "Is there anything else I can help with?" she asked, her voice gentle. "No," Sarah said firmly. "I've got it." For a moment, Angela just stood there, unsure of what to do. She glanced back at the cabinet where Sarah had put the box, then turned and headed back to the living room. As Angela left the kitchen, Sarah watched her go. Her eyes narrowed slightly, her lips pressing into a thin line. In the living room, Marcus and Richard were deep in conversation. Richard was laughing at something Marcus had said, his cheerful energy filling the room. Angela returned, taking a seat beside Marcus. He glanced at her, noticing the look on her face. "Everything okay?" he asked quietly. Angela hesitated before nodding. "Yeah, everything's fine," she said, forcing a small smile. But Marcus knew his wife too well. Something had happened in that kitchen. He decided not to press her, at least not right now. Richard, still smiling, stood up. "It's been great meeting you two," he said warmly. "I hope you're settling in okay." "We are," Marcus replied. "Thanks again for having us over." As they all moved toward the door, Angela felt a sense of relief. The visit hadn't been perfect, but at least it was over. She was already looking forward to going home and forgetting about Sarah's strange behavior. But just as they were about to step outside, Sarah's voice stopped them. "Wait," she said sharply. Angela and Marcus turned to look at her. Sarah was standing a few feet away, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. Her face was serious, her eyes cold. "I'm missing something," Sarah said, her voice accusing. Angela blinked, confused. "What do you mean?" she asked. "One of my gold spoons," Sarah said, her tone growing sharper. "It's gone." Marcus frowned. "There must be some kind of mistake," he said, his voice calm but firm. "There's no mistake," Sarah snapped. "It was in the box on the counter." "The one she was looking at?" she said, pointing directly at Angela. Angela's stomach dropped. She opened her mouth to respond, but no words came out. "You were the only one in the kitchen with me," Sarah continued, her tone rising. "I think we need to check your bag." Angela stared at Sarah, her mind racing. She felt anger rising in her chest, but more than that, she felt hurt. Marcus stepped forward, his voice steady. "This is ridiculous," he said. "Angela didn't take anything." Richard, looking uncomfortable, tried to step in. "Sarah, maybe it's just misplaced," he said, his tone careful, but Sarah shook her head. "No, I know it was there before she went into the kitchen," she insisted. "And now it's gone." Angela's hands shook slightly, but she kept her voice calm. "You can search my bag," she said, her words deliberate. "I have nothing to hide. If you were in Angela's shoes, would you have allowed anyone to check your bag?" Richard looked at his wife, his expression pleading. "Sarah, are you sure about this?" he asked quietly. But Sarah didn't back down. She reached for Angela's bag, opening it quickly. And then her face lit up with triumph. She pulled out a gold spoon, holding it high for everyone to see. "There it is," she said, her voice filled with smug satisfaction. Angela felt like the ground had just been pulled out from under her. She stared at the spoon, her mind racing. "See?" Sarah said, turning to Richard and Marcus. "I told you. I knew it." Marcus stepped forward, his voice rising slightly. "This doesn't make any sense," he said. "Why would Angela take something like that?" "You'll have to ask her," Sarah said coldly. Angela's heart pounded in her chest. She felt a mix of disbelief, anger, and humiliation. But before she could speak, Sarah pulled out her phone. "I'm calling the police," Sarah said, dialing quickly. The room fell silent as Sarah spoke to the operator, her voice calm and confident. "Yes, I need the police at my house. "There's been a theft," she said. "I caught someone in the act." Angela stood frozen, her mind reeling. She had come here with nothing but kindness, and now she was being accused of stealing. Marcus placed a hand on her shoulder, his voice low. "We'll figure this out," he said. But as the sound of sirens echoed in the distance, Angela couldn't help but wonder, how had things gone so wrong so quickly? Little did Sarah know, the truth was about to come out. And when it did, it would turn her entire world upside down. Was Sarah right to have called the police? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. The sound of sirens broke through the quiet suburban street, growing louder with every passing second. Angela and Marcus stood on the porch, their hearts pounding as the flashing lights of the patrol car came into view. Neighbors peeked out from behind curtains and half-open doors. A few stepped onto their lawns, curious about what was happening. The peaceful neighborhood was suddenly buzzing with whispers and speculation. Angela felt frozen in place. Her mind was spinning. How had it come to this? She and Marcus had only come here to introduce themselves, to be good neighbors, and now they were being treated like criminals. Beside her, Marcus placed a protective hand on her shoulder. His jaw was tight, his calm demeanor cracking under the weight of the moment. "Stay strong," he said quietly, his voice steady but firm. The police car came to a stop in front of the house, and two officers stepped out. One was tall and serious, his face unreadable. The other, slightly younger, seemed hesitant, as if he could already sense the tension in the air. Sarah stood on the porch, her arms crossed tightly, her face smug. She glanced at the officers, then at Angela, her eyes narrowing. "Thank you for coming so quickly," Sarah said, her tone dripping with feigned concern. "I caught this woman stealing from me. She took one of my gold spoons. It's right there in her bag." The officers exchanged glances before one of them stepped forward. "Ma'am," he said, addressing Angela, "we're here to figure out what happened. Can you explain your side of the story?" Angela took a deep breath, her hands trembling slightly. "I didn't take anything," she said, her voice steady despite the fear and anger bubbling inside her. "I don't know how the spoon got into my bag, but I didn't put it there." Sarah scoffed loudly, shaking her head. "Of course you'd say that," she said, "but I saw her near the box. She must have taken it when I wasn't looking." Marcus stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. "This doesn't make any sense," he said. "Why would my wife steal something like that? We came here with a gift basket, not to cause trouble." The officer held up a hand, trying to keep the situation under control. "We're going to get to the bottom of this," he said. He turned back to Angela. "Ma'am, would you allow us to check your bag again?" Angela's stomach churned. She wanted to scream, to demand that someone listen to her, but she knew how this would look if she resisted. Slowly she nodded. "Go ahead," she said quietly. One of the officers took the bag and opened it carefully. He pulled out the gold spoon, holding it up for everyone to see. Sarah let out a dramatic gasp, pointing toward Angela. "There, I told you," she said, her voice triumphant. Angela felt her knees weaken. She couldn't believe this was happening. She looked at Marcus, her eyes pleading. "I didn't take it," she whispered. Marcus stepped closer, his voice rising slightly. "This is ridiculous," he said, addressing the officers. "My wife didn't steal anything. Someone must have put that spoon in her bag." The air was thick with tension as the lead officer held up the golden spoon he had just pulled from Angela's bag. All eyes were on her. Sarah's smug expression screamed victory, while Angela stood frozen, disbelief etched across her face. "I can't believe this is happening," Angela thought, her mind racing. The officer's voice cut through the silence like a blade. "Ma'am, we have evidence here. You're in possession of stolen property," he said. "I'm going to need you to come with us." Angela's breath caught in her throat. She opened her mouth to speak, but her words were drowned by the wave of humiliation washing over her. "What?" she finally managed to say, her voice trembling. "I didn't take it. This is a mistake." Beside her, Marcus's hands balled into fists. He stepped forward, placing himself protectively between Angela and the officers. His voice was calm but firm. "You can't be serious," he said. "My wife is innocent. You can't arrest her without fully understanding what happened." But the officer didn't back down. His tone was clipped, almost dismissive. "Sir, the evidence is clear. The stolen item was found in her bag." "That doesn't mean she put it there," Marcus snapped, his voice rising slightly. "Why don't you dig deeper instead of jumping to conclusions?" The officer hesitated, glancing at his partner. But Sarah, standing a few feet away, wasted no time adding fuel to the fire. "Are you really going to let them question your authority?" Sarah said, her voice dripping with faux concern. "I told you what happened. I caught her, and now she's lying to your face." Angela's jaw tightened. The insult stung, but more than that, it was the realization that these officers were buying into Sarah's lies without hesitation. This can't be happening, Angela thought, her chest tightening. They're not even asking the right questions. Are the officers right to arrest Angela? Subscribe if you want justice for Angela. One of the officers moved closer, his hand reaching for his handcuffs. "Ma'am," he said, addressing Angela, "please turn around and place your hands behind your back." The world seemed to tilt as Angela processed his words. Was this really happening? Was she, an innocent woman, about to be handcuffed like a common criminal, based on nothing more than an assumption? "No," Angela said, her voice trembling but growing steadier with each word. "This isn't right. You're making a mistake." But the officer didn't stop. His hand hovered over her wrist, and Angela knew she had to act fast. Taking a deep breath, Angela reached into her pocket. "You're right about one thing," she said, her voice cutting through the rising tension. "There is a mistake here, but it's not mine." With that, Angela pulled out a badge and held it up for everyone to see. The officers froze. Sarah's smug smirk vanished, replaced by wide eyes and a face turning pale. The neighbors watching from their yards gasped audibly, some even stepping closer for a better look. "I am Angela Thompson," she said, her voice calm but firm, "and I'm the new chief of police." The silence that followed was deafening. The lead officer's face drained of color, his outstretched hand retracting as if he'd touched a live wire. "Chief Thompson," the officer stammered, his voice barely above a whisper. Angela nodded, lowering the badge but keeping her gaze locked on him. "That's correct. And now I'd like to know why you thought it was acceptable to move straight to an arrest without considering any other possibilities." The officer opened his mouth to respond but quickly shut it again. Beside him, his partner looked equally flustered, avoiding Angela's piercing gaze. "You didn't even ask for more evidence," Angela continued, her voice rising slightly. "Is that standard procedure?" The lead officer cleared his throat, trying to regain some semblance of control. "No, ma'am," he said finally. "It's not." "Then why is that what happened here today?" Angela asked. The officers stood speechless, the weight of their mistake hanging heavy in the air. Angela didn't wait for an answer. She turned to Sarah, her expression unreadable but her eyes blazing. "If I'm guilty, as you claim," Angela said coldly, "then the security footage from your house will prove it. Let's check the cameras." Sarah's confidence wavered. She took a step back, her face growing pale. "That's not necessary," she said quickly. "I already told you what happened. You don't need to waste time with the cameras." "Oh, I think we do," Angela said, her voice sharp. She turned to the officers. "Let's go inside and review the footage." The officers exchanged glances before nodding. "Yes, Chief," the lead officer said quietly, motioning for Sarah to lead them inside. Inside the house, Sarah's panic grew with every step. Her heart pounded as they approached the security monitor. Her hands trembled as she fumbled with the controls, trying to stall. "These cameras don't always work," she said nervously, forcing a laugh. "Sometimes the footage gets corrupted." The lead officer frowned. "We'll check anyway," he said firmly. Sarah's breath quickened. She knew the truth was about to come out. She glanced at the controls, her eyes locking on the delete button. If she could just press it, she could erase the evidence and save herself. Her fingers hovered over the button, but before she could act, Angela's voice rang out from behind her. "Step away from the monitor," Angela said sharply. Sarah froze, turning slowly to face Angela, who had entered the room with Marcus. Angela's expression was cold, her voice commanding. "Were you about to delete the footage?" "No," Sarah said quickly, shaking her head. "I was just—" "Don't lie to me," Angela said, cutting her off. She motioned to the officers. "Play the footage." The room fell silent as the video began to play. The footage showed Angela standing by the counter, admiring the golden box but never touching it. Moments later, Sarah appeared on screen. She glanced around nervously, opened the box, took out a spoon, and slipped it into Angela's bag. The video ended, and all eyes turned to Sarah. The lead officer stepped forward, his voice cold. "Care to explain this?" he asked. Sarah stammered, her words tumbling over each other. "I didn't mean for it to go this far," she said. "I just thought people like you shouldn't be in our neighborhood." "You thought you could frame me because I'm black," Angela said, her tone cutting. "And you thought no one would figure it out." The officer nodded grimly. "Attempting to delete the footage? That's obstruction of justice, and filing a false police report? That's a crime." One of the officers stepped forward, pulling out a pair of handcuffs. "Sarah Frederick, you're under arrest for filing a false police report and obstruction of justice," he said firmly. Sarah's face crumpled. "This is a misunderstanding," she cried. "I didn't mean..." The officer ignored her protests, cuffing her hands behind her back. Sarah's neighbors watched in stunned silence as she was led to the patrol car. Angela stood tall, her badge gleaming in the sunlight. She turned to the officers, her voice steady. "I hope this serves as a reminder to ask the right questions before jumping to conclusions," she said. The officers nodded, their embarrassment evident. As Sarah was driven away, Angela turned to Marcus. He placed a hand on her back, his voice soft. "You handled that like the leader you are," he said. Angela took a deep breath, her gaze sweeping over the gathered neighbors. "This isn't over," she said quietly. "This is just the beginning. Subscribe if you believe justice must always prevail." The street grew quiet again as the police car carrying Sarah disappeared around the corner. The neighbors who had gathered on their lawns stood frozen, their faces a mix of shock and shame. For the first time, they were forced to confront something uncomfortable, that beneath the perfect lawns and picket fences, prejudice had poisoned their seemingly idyllic community. Angela stood on the porch, her badge still in her hand. Her eyes followed the car until it disappeared, but her thoughts were far from the street. This wasn't just about Sarah's actions. It was about something bigger, a deep-rooted bias that saw her and Marcus not as neighbors, but as outsiders, as threats. Marcus broke the silence, his voice low but firm. "You know why she did it," he said, his gaze steady. Angela nodded, her voice calm but laced with pain. "Because we're black," she said simply, "and she couldn't stand to see us here, in this neighborhood, in her world." Angela stepped forward, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "I know what some of you were thinking when you saw the police car pull up here today," she said, looking out at the gathered neighbors. "You thought, here we go again. Trouble follows people like them." Her words hung in the air, heavy with truth. Some neighbors shifted uncomfortably, avoiding her gaze. "But here's the thing," Angela continued. "We didn't move here to cause trouble. We moved here to build a life, just like every one of you. We wanted the same peace, the same safety, the same sense of belonging that everyone deserves." Marcus stepped closer, his voice calm but firm. "But instead of being treated like neighbors, we were treated like suspects," he added. "And why? Because of the color of our skin." Angela nodded, her eyes scanning the crowd. "This isn't just about us," she said. "It's about how black people are treated in communities like this all across the country. We're watched more closely, we're judged more harshly, and too often we're punished without evidence." Angela's voice grew softer, but the weight of her words carried through the quiet street. "Think about what happened today," she said. "Sarah didn't accuse me because she had proof. She accused me because of a feeling rooted in prejudice. She didn't see me as a person, she saw me as a threat." A few neighbors nodded slowly, their expressions thoughtful. Others looked away, their guilt and discomfort evident. "And the truth is," Angela continued, her voice breaking slightly, "this isn't new for people like me. We've spent our whole lives being judged by the worst assumptions people can make about us, and it needs to stop." Angela paused, letting her words sink in. Then she took a deep breath, her tone shifting from somber to hopeful. "But it doesn't have to stay this way," she said. "We can do better. This community can do better. It starts with each of us, questioning our biases, challenging our assumptions, and treating each other with the respect we all deserve." Marcus nodded, adding, "It's not just about avoiding harm. It's about building trust, about creating a neighborhood where everyone feels welcome. That's the kind of place we want to live in. And I hope it's the kind of place you want to live in, too." Angela's eyes scanned the crowd, her gaze steady. "This is our home now," she said, "and we're not going anywhere. But change starts with all of us." In the weeks that followed, Angela used the incident as a platform to bring the community together. She forgave Sarah and released her, then organized workshops, invited speakers, and opened her home to conversations about race, bias, and belonging. At first, only a few neighbors showed up. Some were too embarrassed, others too afraid to face the truth. But as word spread about Angela's strength, her kindness, and her willingness to forgive, the numbers grew. People began to talk openly about their own biases, about the moments they had judged others unfairly. It wasn't easy and it wasn't perfect, but it was a start. Angela's efforts didn't just change the neighborhood, they inspired the whole town. Local leaders began adopting diversity initiatives. Schools added programs to teach students about empathy and inclusion. And slowly, the community began to look and feel like the welcoming place Angela and Marcus had hoped for when they first moved in. And if this story moved you, taught you, or opened your eyes, make sure to subscribe to Living Stories for more powerful tales that inspire change. Together, we can build a better tomorrow.